Good morning, and welcome to the inaugural Kenneth Cole Community Engagement Forum. My name is Jorge Betanzos, and I am a junior studying chemical engineering at Columbia Engineering, and I am honored to introduce the first panel of the day, Creating a Sustainable Community, Ensuring Access to Healthy Food. This topic is of special interest to me because of this summer, as a Kenneth Cole Fellow, and the work done with the Mary Mitchell Family and Youth Center in the East Tremont area of the Bronx. There, I was introduced to the issue of food deserts, a term used to describe neighborhoods that have limited access to affordable and nutritious food. The Mary Mitchell Center is located in such a neighborhood. When this term was first introduced to me, I was completely oblivious to what a food desert was, and then stunned to hear that a food desert exists so close to us, here in Manhattan. To think that people do not have the choice to buy healthy food because they do not have access to it was completely shocking. When I hear about accessibility issues, I immediately think of countries experiencing extreme distress due to war or famine, not the United States, and especially not New York City. To my surprise, problems with food access do not only occur where food is scarce, but they can also occur in cities where food seems to be overly abundant. For the Kenneth Cole program, it was the job of the Mary Mitchell team to conceive of a way in which healthy food could be brought to the East Tremont area in an easy and affordable manner. Our work for the summer was to create a business plan for a sustainable food distribution program for the families of the neighborhood. I learned one of the most important lessons of the summer. In order to help a community, you need to get to know a community. We created a survey that looked at the buying habits of the community members, where fresh fruits and vegetables, as well as whole grains, were bought in the neighborhood. This led us to a design of a distribution center that would bring weekly baskets of fresh fruits and vegetables and whole grains to convenient locations in the South Bronx. We named the business La Canasta, or the basket in Spanish, in reference to the basket of food the Mary Mitchell Center believes everyone should have access to in their community. Working in the South Bronx was a completely new experience for me. From this experience, I learned the importance of fieldwork and actually connecting to a community to solve a problem. Surveying and gathering the opinions of the people in the East Tremont area was one of the most powerful motivators for my summer. I learned that people respond when asked to contribute to the positive developments of their communities. So let us begin with today's first panel, which will allow us to discuss issues of food availability in our community. More importantly, not only will the problem be identified, but potential solutions will be discussed. People have the ability to make the change in their community, and the representatives of these organizations know that firsthand. Research, discussion, and examining different points of view makes the solving of these vast problems possible, but the participation of every individual is paramount. Therefore, as individuals engaged in our food systems, it is important for us to listen and learn from these leaders so that we can help ensure sustainable accessibility to food. Our three guests for this panel discussion are Michael Conard, Michael Hurwitz, and Abby Youngblood. Each will have an opportunity to speak on their involvement and ideas on the topic, followed by a panel discussion, and we'll conclude with the question and answer session. And now, it is my pleasure to introduce Claire Shipman, a celebrated interviewer that you may know from ABC News. She is a recipient of the coveted Peabody Award for her work on the coverage of the 1991 Soviet coup and dissolution of the Soviet Union, and the co-author of the book Womenomics. Please help me welcome a fellow Lion, Columbia College graduate of '86, Claire Shipman.
That was great. Thank you very much for coming out for this panel. Thank you for having me here. It is terrific to be here, and I know you're going to find this out soon enough, with some of the keenest minds on this issue, and not just great minds, but people who really are engaged on the front lines in this issue. And I think what's terrific about the issue of food sustainability is that we're all, to some extent, on the front lines. It's an issue that affects us all every day in the choices that we're making, or what we buy, what we eat. And I think that makes it potentially a powerful issue for community involvement and engagement, and one that people can really gather around. And we've already seen that to some extent. I'm sure you've seen that Michelle Obama's campaign against obesity is really starting to have an impact, her focus on healthy food growth. And I had an unusual experience recently, unrelated to this. A month ago, I hosted something called the Food Dialogues that was sponsored by Big Agriculture. They brought together for a day an enormous array of people: organic farmers, dairy farmers, big farmers from the Midwest, chefs, nutritionists. And we had a really interesting discussion, but what I thought was most interesting is that these, conventional big ag businesses are very focused now on the change in demand and the new demand for more information about what they're providing, and maybe different ways, different things even that they can provide. So I think this is it's a very hot topic right now, and one that again might even, as everybody gathers around it, force change in other more esoteric issues, the environment, social issues. So we hope to dig in today to look at issues of food fairness, food availability, healthy food availability, and also the impact on health and environment of how food is grown, where it's grown, how it's distributed, and the bottom line economics of all of it, which of course is very important. I want to introduce our panelists in more depth. First, on the farthest seat down there, Michael Conard. He's here at Columbia at the Earth Institute in the Urban Design Lab. He's also an adjunct professor at the Graduate School of Architecture. He's conducted extensive research in urban design over the last 25 years, really around the world. And specifically, I think some of the areas he's focused his research on that will interest us today, supplying more food in urban areas, more food from regional sources, sustainable urban agriculture, and childhood obesity. Next to Michael I was going to say it's another Michael, but it's not, it's Abby. Abby's in the middle, Abby Youngblood. She's part of the Just Food organization, and she is the Fresh Food for All program coordinator, an organization very much focused on accessibility of healthy food for New Yorkers. She's also got some real world experience as a farm manager, or a manager of an organic farm in upstate New York, and has long been focused on issues of food justice. She worked in Philadelphia on the Coalition Against Hunger. We also have our other Michael at the end, Michael Hurwitz. He's the executive director of Greenmarket, which as New Yorkers you're probably well aware of. It's part of the city's Council on the Environment, but it's one of the largest networks of farmers markets in the world. And it encompasses farmers markets that range in size from maybe 4 farmers to 75 farmers. It's in all sorts of neighborhoods. They're looking at the challenges of entering places where no farm market has ever been before. And he's also been very focused, which is relevant for us today, on education and ways to get an enormous number of students in having experiences at farmers markets every year. So what I'd love to do is invite each of our panelists to make some remarks about the research they're doing, what they're involved in, and then we'll jump into the discussion, and I'll start with Michael.
Great. Thank you. Claire, thank you. I'm very pleased to be here and have the opportunity to speak to you. My colleague, Kubi Ackerman, couldn't because he, as of yesterday morning at 7, had a baby boy. So anyway, we're pleased with that as well. So to be here with Michael and Abby, who represent 2 organizations that have done so much to change the food environment. At the Urban Design Lab, are really relative newcomers to this. So what I'd like to do today is to speak to you about our work very briefly over the last 5 years at a number of scales that we've been working at. At the lab, we were really formed about 5 years ago to implement a lot of the core sciences of the Earth Institute. And it became fairly clear early on, and is really kind of what we're doing now, is as designers, we're really driving a lot of the discussion, design thinking, kind of bridging between the kind of core sciences and policy and projects to really implement that ability to think cross-disciplinary, that ability to think across the sort of the traditional camps, is really an enormous opportunity as we are beginning to face some of the world's most difficult challenges. And we're often asked as designers how we got interested in the food system. And a lot of it has to do with the fact, as you're probably aware, that recently, for the first time in human history, over half of our population is now urban, and cities are hungry. Increasingly, urban populations, especially the rise of big megacities, multi-million cities internationally, this is significantly due to the urban and to the agricultural changes in technology, which have displaced a number of the rural populations to urban. Those populations have expanded and started to consume the periphery and peri-urban areas as well. So the impacts of this process of urbanization are enormous and are presently affecting healthy food access, affordability, and food security. So at the lab, we apply design thinking to complex social and environmental problems. And in that capacity, we were asked to find a solution to the issue of childhood obesity. So as part of this research, for example, kind of distilling complex issues into understandable ways, this spider diagram is a compilation of the reading and assessing of over 1,000 scholarly reports and articles to really understand strategically where one needs to operate. So using a stoplight system, we're able to look at the various components of obesity and think strategically about where to go, presented in a clear and understandable way to partners, constituents, and the like. And it became fairly clear early on that to go after this problem, we needed to be on the intake side of the equation. We needed, but to also, if we're going after food intake, we had to be dealing with access, availability, education, and affordability, and we needed to look not only at any one of them, but to look comprehensively at systems change. So I want to just sort of set this up very quickly. This animation gives you a sense how quickly this crisis has occurred. Really in the 80s, we've moved to a culture that is 33% obese. We are, and this crisis is challenging our economy. We know that in 2080, it's projected from conservative sources that over 50% of our GDP will go to addressing health care, chronic health care costs related to obesity. That number in 2008 was 168 billion. This is 100, let's go to the next slide. 117 billion, and it's 800 billion per year in direct and indirect costs. An increasing number of epidemiologists believe that obesity will soon rival tobacco as the world's leading cause of preventable disease. The health effects of this obesity pandemic are on their way to reversing the life expectancy gains we've made in recent decades. Subnote, our children's generation will not live as long as we have. Health complications due to weight gain are fast becoming a global human health issue as the global overweight population begins to exceed that of people suffering from undernutrition. So the simple fact is that total calorie availability has increased and people are eating more. This is due to a number of influences, but most has to do with the cheap food policy, specifically policies to maximize the production of calories in the US system. And this has spatial consequences, and we'll talk a little about the urban and peri-urban, but on the national scale, areas with high commodity production associated directly with areas of high commodity or high subsidy, areas where just some of the most fertile cropland in the world. So our current food system was developed with an emphasis on quantity over quality, actively promoting a reduction of crop variety. Low cost and long shelf life make highly processed food particularly attractive to families, all of us, with limited budgets. And our research in the lab suggests that our current food system's regional and local infrastructure make healthy food, the lack of that, make healthy food prohibitively expensive to a large percentage of the population. And I won't go into this diagram, but a lot of the work continuing really tries to make sense of why processed food is less expensive per calorie than whole foods. You know, a couple of kind of shocking images. This is a diagram, county-level data, where, and we've heard a little bit of introduction of food deserts. Severe food deserts are in dark blue. And if you look at the relationship between food deserts and counties that are agricultural, you can see the direct relationship, implying a severe breakdown in our food system, which really can only be addressed at the federal level. And that's an urban issue as well. There is a correlation between areas with limited access to healthy food and areas of obesity and chronic disease prevalence. Reports that looked at Chicago and New York, areas with limited healthy food access and rates of obesity. Just to edit that down, you can see the direct relationship in Chicago and the West Loop and South Side, in New York, East Harlem, and Brownsville. So a lot of the work that we're doing, since our food is produced, processed, and distributed, and how that is produced, processed, and distributed directly affects the quality of the food and subsequently obesity and chronic disease, we've begun researching the impacts and opportunities of reestablishing what we call a regional food shed. Solutions to this system will involve changes in food production, the development of regionally based processing and distribution infrastructure, and new models for healthy food retail. The other piece of this is the urban piece, and just go into this very quickly. We've recently completed a study, the goals of which were to assess the capacity of the city to produce crops and what are the benefits for urban agriculture. The key findings of this were that ag can be a productive role in green infrastructure and community development. There are over 5,000 acres of vacant land in New York City, and we'll talk about that in a minute. There are really three types of urban ag: ground-based, controlled environment-based, and rooftops. And this is a strategic thinking about how rooftops of a particular size can be located in areas most environmentally challenged. We assessed in this project the variable land availabilities by borough. But I think the aha moment for me was when we confirmed that the locations of the majority of vacant land were in the communities had low access to healthy foods, high prevalence of obesity and chronic disease, and low medium incomes. These were the areas where urban agriculture could have the greatest impact on food security. Additionally, as Claire had mentioned, there's great opportunities for ecological services. We've heard of, obviously, the problem of combined storm overflow, and urban ag has a huge opportunity to contribute to the city's now suggestion that there needs to be a diverse, decentralized systems. There's opportunity to address climate. New York, though, is fairly efficient because of its densities relative to other American cities. It still has twice the carbon footprint of the global average. We can address through urban ag and urban horticulture the decreases in the island index, building energy, and address food distribution. And finally, we know as our metropolis continues to grow, we grapple with the question of waste. Food waste is an unfortunate example where over 40% of the food produced in the farms of the United States is not consumed. New Yorkers produce about 2 to 2.5 pounds of waste per day. This is much less than the national average of 4.3. But there's a great opportunity and obviously great need to close that nutrient cycle with the development of these programs. So most global food crises, as we know, have been infrastructural, involving breakdowns in regional distribution systems. bigger systems really clearly are not better systems in the long term. And I think this question that this conference that Claire moderated is very interesting, because big business is looking for new business models, particularly with rising fuel costs, increased uncertainty caused by climate, overlapping and redundant systems that build on rural and urban communities. Capacity building really provides the greatest opportunity for security. Strengthening our regional and urban systems will be a key contributor to some of these most challenging environmental problems our generation and our children's generation face. Consumers concentrating mostly in the urban areas, we believe there's a positive that the demand side will really drive the equation. And we know, and we just talked about a little earlier, that in New York alone, over $800 million per year in untapped demand for local regional food. And that, for us, there's an opportunity to build that bridge. And I think what we're going to learn today is speak to some of the people that are building those bridges. So I think with this, with public involvement, and we're starting to see that in our elected officials, because they know that they're really beginning to understand the need, and also the political opportunity for engaging these issues, to really reestablish the our resources, to be able to reinvigorate our food systems and cultivate a more secure food environment. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. So, 14 years ago, I wouldn't have been able to tell you what the word sustainable agriculture means. I love food, tell. I knew that food that I bought at farmers markets tasted better than the food that I got at the supermarkets. I didn't understand why, and I didn't know why that mattered. And then my background is I was a social worker working with young adults, families, and communities involved in the child welfare and juvenile injustice worlds, and was in a community garden with a young 16-year-old heroin dealer. And someone educated us about what you could do with an organic dandelion. And it just clicked for this kid. And I watched as young people would come back to this community garden after their community service sanctions were over. And other young people that we worked with would come to this community garden because it was a nurturing, safe space where they could actually see something that they would start. And then the end result, which most people in this world don't really have the access to. And that was growing a vegetable. A safe space was a nurturing space, and it transformed what their sense of possibility was. Here's a young adult in a community where 40% of the homes earn less than $10,000. And within 2 years, he was bringing home 30% of his family's household income legally by selling organic produce to a community that has disproportionate rates of diet-related illnesses. It clicked. It transforms the way people view young people and also what resources are available. So here's this vacant land that could be a shooting gallery, could be where all negative activities were taking place in the neighborhood. That was transformed and, again, provided organic produce below market values to a community facing disproportionate rates of diet-related illnesses and had an unemployment rate 2.5 times that of the city. So I got it, and I started learning side by side with our young people why agriculture matters and why sustainable agriculture matters and why who grows our food, how it's grown, and who has access to it are going to be the most important questions that we answer as a society in the next 20 to 30 years. So that took me to Greenmarket. And Greenmarket is a 35-year organization. We are a program of Grow NYC. We turned 40 last year, had a midlife crisis, changed our name, rebranded, and now it's Grow NYC, no longer the Council on the Environment. But we do the same work. 35 years ago, the situation was very similar to the situation today. In the 15 years leading up to the development, to the creation of Greenmarket, we lost 500,000 acres of productive farmland in just the Hudson Valley alone. And with real estate pressures, we continue to lose farmland at an alarming rate in New York State. So Greenmarket's mission is, and where sustainable agriculture, we want to talk about food access, and sustainable agriculture begins on the farm. So our mission is to support small family farms by providing them access directly to New York City customers. The second part of our mission is to make sure that every New Yorker has access to regionally produced agricultural products. So we have 53 markets in every borough, in all types of neighborhoods. And I will tell you, we've been in the South Bronx for 25 years, long before the term food desert was coined, in Washington Heights long before people were talking about food access issues, because we know and recognize that every community and every family wants to feed themselves the healthiest and tastiest products out there. And I'll get to the access issue. But see our mission, and really what we're trying to do is transform cement into vibrant civic engagement, spaces of civic engagement, educational centers, and of course, markets. We have a strange region, 250 miles to the north, 120 miles to the south, and 170 miles east and west. Clearly, we needed you in the 70s. As you can see the styles on opening day. There's our founders, Barry Benepe and Bob Lewis. Opening day. So, opening day, the story that we tell, and it's actually a true story, but Ron Benaghi, who's one of our founding farmers, Bob and Barry drove around convincing farmers, come to New York City, come to New York City. I promise you won't get mugged, be fine, and you'll make a killing. So Ron Benaghi came in on day one and was sold out by 11 o'clock. Right. Our first market was on 2nd Avenue and 59th Street. It's now a high rise, but that's okay. We bob and weave, and that's part of the realities of setting up on a street corner in New York City and selling. But Ron goes home and his father says, is there a famine that we don't know about in New York City? And obviously there wasn't, but access to good tasting, healthy foods, there was, we'll call it famine, but there was no access. It wasn't taking place. And Greenmarket was born and started to change the way people understood food and recognized food and interacted with the people who produced their food. So we've grown from that one location, again, to 53 locations, from 12 farmers to about 240. And really, if you can grow it, catch it, bake it, or find it in our region, you're going to find it in the markets. 70% of our producers come from New York State, but our region encompasses tiny parts of Maine, Vermont, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey. This is the Black Dirt region of Orange County in New York. And what you're looking at right now, after Irene was underwater and everything that you see in the ground was destroyed and devastated. And that's been one of our realities this year, helping to support those growers, helping to make sure that markets remain full so that you have access, again, to locally grown products, ways that remain affordable depending on the CSA that you're in, or what market you're in, and keeping these guys so that they can come back next year. Again, everything that can be grown in our region, you'll find at market. What you see here, these guys had a hailstorm in 2007, and 98% of what they grew was destroyed. The first thing that Sue did was ran out into her fields and collected all the seeds from what was destroyed, because they saved their seeds, their heirloom varieties, and every year they're producing what they control. And from a food security perspective, whether it's internationally or domestically, having control of the seeds is fundamentally having control of the food system. And we'll talk later about what that means. We have farmers from all over the world. We actually have Nestor as a graduate of our new farmer development program. So we work with immigrants to the US with existing agricultural knowledge, help provide them with technical assistance and training to adapt those skills to the Northeast, and then again, hands-on training for how to build a business here in the States, and then plug them directly into our markets, which one diversifies the type of products we can have at markets, making sure that we can have traditional foods in communities that we're in. And also, it's nice to have farmers representing that look like the communities and talk from like the communities that we're selling to. We have farmers from all over the world that happen to be women. And the diversity of cultures within the U.S. One of the things that our markets have done, particularly recently, as the public becomes more aware of the relationship between how food is grown and personal health and environmental health, the demand for sustainably raised livestock has somewhat gone through the roof. And it's one of the few places that livestock producers who are growing on pasture can actually get the fair dollar for their products. And a number of farms that otherwise would have gone out of business are now viable and bringing delicious products to you. New York State is now the 4th most productive dairy state in the country. 2 years ago, we were the 3rd most productive dairy state in the country, and that's not because cows were producing less milk, because we're losing our farms, particularly our dairy farms. I mean, the industry is being decimated by the price that you're getting on the wholesale market. This farm, considered Bardwell, partnered with Jersey Girl Farm, who was raising the milk. These guys are the cheesemakers, and they're farmers. They raise goats, and they saved Jersey Girl Farm because for $2 more per gallon, at a cost that they can pass on to the New York City consumer through a value-added product, which is their cheese, that dairy farm remains in production, and these guys can bring their product to New York City. Our fishing communities, our small fishing communities, are facing the same challenges as our farming communities, consolidation, and lack of infrastructure. You lose the processing plant, you can't cut your fish, you can't. One of the impacts of the hurricanes, we have about 7 fishmongers in our program. They survived the flooding, but electricity was out on Long Island for a week. So there was no way to keep their fish fresh, and there was no way to process the fish. So they lost out on markets, which was devastating to their bottom line. But again, from infrastructure to small-scale support and pricing on the wholesale market, our fishing communities are facing the same challenges as our farming communities, and you're starting to see a lot more of our fishers trying to sell directly to consumers. CSA models around the fishing industry as well. And I think people are becoming more aware of how, again, related to the livestock and agricultural production, what it means to support the small-scale fisher from a food safety perspective and from a sustainability perspective. One of our challenges, we have an aging farming community. Over 50% of our farmers are over the age of 55. And we need to make sure that the next generation of farmer has a place to sell and sees a viable future in agriculture. So this the guy on the left is Ron Benaghi, who went home to his dad. His dad said, is there a famine in New York City? And that's Ron Benaghi. I actually think that's Ron Benaghi Jr. And on the right is his son, Ron Benaghi III. These guys are in Bergen County, New Jersey. They're sitting on $12 million worth of farmland. So they are the exception to the rule in terms of the property values that they're sitting on. But they're not going to sell their farm because Ron III knows, because he has his own market in Pepper Square, that he can continue to come into New York City and have a future in agriculture. Albert Wilklow, same thing, 6th generation. Albert and his 3 sisters are all now back on the farm with their father, who came to Greenmarket 26 years ago because they could not get another loan from Farm Credit. So someone in Ulster County said, why don't you go down to Brooklyn and try selling some apples? And 26 years later, here's the next generation coming down to Fort Greene selling apples. Another thing about this farm, when I started at Greenmarket about 5 years ago, they sold apples and baked goods. I guess orchard fruit and baked goods. Now they sell pork, they sell beef, they sell a variety of squash, and a few other varieties of vegetables. They understand that part of their insurance program is having the diversity of crops, because they're really, for many of our small scale growers, their crop insurance is not available to them, something that we're learning more in the aftermath of all the flooding and destruction. The other is it's creating a more biodiverse farm. So it's from soil structure to, again, preserving the diversity of the products. It's giving back to the land and not necessarily just taking the nutrients from the land. Something that small-scale agriculture, there's a cost to cheap food, and something else we will talk about in our discussion. But when you are practicing small-scale agriculture and biodiversity, you are preserving the land itself and not just taking from it. This is Union Square, our largest market. 2/3 of our farmers sell there at least one of the days of the week. We're year-round, 4 days a week. But our markets, again, our places, New York City, we are not certified organic. We have about 10% of our producers are certified organic. Overwhelming majority do grow organically, all of the orchards are practicing integrated pest management. Some are growing organically. It's very difficult to grow organically on the commercial scale in the Northeast, but hopefully that's something that we'll see change. And I wonder if climate change will actually impact that in the years to come. Again, if going to biodiversity, the picture on the right, this is John Grzinski. He grows over 650 varieties of greens alone. And these are all those seeds that were saved. These are the results. Our markets are nothing if they're not community centers of activity. About 5,000 kids go through our market every year. We take farmers into classrooms. We also have a Seed to Play curricula that we developed with Teachers College here. You can't walk through a market without tasting, without smelling, and without some type of educational activity going on at our manager station. We have about 55 staff during peak season, and this is us visiting a farm. Again, I'll call it professional development and team building, but you have to go visit farms and know who's there, who's present. These are graduates of the new Farmer Development Program. So I talked that we've been in the South Bronx, we've been in Washington Heights for 25 plus years. Well, in 2001, food stamps in New York City went wireless. So you can be in any community. We've closed markets in the last 5 years in the West Village, Murray Hill. We've opened markets in Corona, in the Bronx, and it's the neighborhood that you're in. Economics is not the deciding factor of whether or not you're going to build a successful marketplace. It's community buy-in, community ownership, and whether or not the folks living in the neighborhood have access to the market. So we have a few markets where food stamps, farmers market nutrition program, vouchers, and health bucks represent 85% of the sales that are made. It goes to show you that if there are purchase supports, we have some farmers, they don't want to go to Union Square. They don't want to go to Abington Square. They want to go to Poe Park in the Bronx. They're going to go there, they're going to make a killing that day. And what they're going to take home mostly is going to be paper coupons and health bucks, and farmers market nutrition bucks. But what we were able to do in 2001, we've had some incredible support from City Council, is build our food stamp at the farmers market program using wireless terminals and these wooden tokens. We have a market manager at a stand, so someone can come swipe their card. You can also do debit or credit. In fact, Thursdays and Sundays, right outside here, you can see it in action. The market manager, you swipe your card, and then you can go and shop using the tokens. Because the wireless technology is not so great that every farmer wants to have it. They want that seamless 2-second, here's the money, here's back, but we can provide the back-end support. We've also developed our own buck program with Mount Sinai, we're Mount Sinai Hospital, where we're across the street, and Columbian Presbyterian, again, to engage patients and employees in the surrounding community to incentivize shopping at a farmer's market. And we'll get into pricing at farmers markets probably in our conversation, but even if you have this program, like even if there's access for food stamps at a farmer's market, you're on a limited budget, and it doesn't necessarily mean you can stretch those dollars to shop at the farmer's market. So what we did about 4 years ago is for every $5 you spent using EBT food stamps, you got a $2 health buck. So that's a 40% boost in your buying power. And during some weeks, we were able to actually do a double voucher. And these incentive programs, our sales went through the roof, and farmers were taking home significantly more money. And it also meant, and I'll show you the numbers. When we started this program in 2005, we did $987 worth of food stamps. This year, we are going to surpass $750,000. And that means that's $750,000 worth of the healthiest products and the best tasting products that were not available in the communities that we're in 4 years ago. And when you throw on an additional $160,000 worth of health bucks, we're talking near $900,000. And if we didn't have the season that we had this year, where it wasn't raining significantly both down here and upstate, we're talking $1 million in sales. So it shows you in 5 years what is possible, and that there is real demand everywhere. Anyone want to take a guess what market of ours, staying in the neighborhood, is the highest grossing food stamp market that we operate? Throw out a borough, throw out a neighborhood, you name it. Union Square. We're going to do $150,000 this year in food stamp sales at our foodie market for a number of reasons. One is Union Square serves the cross-section of New York City and beyond. Secondly, there is the range of price. It's one of the things about a farmer's market. You can buy your head of lettuce for $1 per head, or 50 cents per head, and you can buy your mixed mesclun mix for $48 a pound. And at the end of the day, when we go and collect the tokens, there are tokens at both of those stands. And it's also one of the challenges with our markets in very low income communities is protein. So yeah, you cutting me off?
I was going to say, yeah, I don't want to cut you off, but I want to save some of this for the discussion, because I want to be able to ask you questions.
All right, then I'll get into just a couple other things very quickly, and then I'll step down. Farmers markets are not the solution to meet the demand that Michael talked about, and they're not always going to, and they're definitely not going to supply every community or institutions with food at the cost that they need to be provided. We began working with wholesale farmers a few years ago, and we run a few programs out of the wholesale market. One is our Fresh Bodega initiative, where we've actually provided refrigeration units to bodegas, Bed-Stuy, and in central Harlem, participating in central Harlem, so that one of our farmers is who is a Greenmarket grower, but also wholesales and has trucks on the road, can do the distribution route. And providing the infrastructure to the bodega and actually providing the food on consignment, the bodega owners have to take no risk. But again, it provides the same food that's at a farmer's market in communities where people already are shopping, in the stores where they're already shopping 24/7, and not just one day a week for limited hours, which a farmer's market does. And these are the partners who are involved. There's an example of a refrigeration unit in the bodega. This was what Union Square looked like 5 o'clock this morning. I'll turn it over to Abby, and we'll get into it.
Thank you.
Great. Good morning. My name is Abby Youngblood, as you know, and I run the Fresh Food for All program at Just Food. And what I want to do is I want to very briefly give you an overview of the work we do at Just Food. And I also want to talk very briefly about how you can get involved in this food justice work and the local foods movement. And I'm really eager for the discussion that all of us are going to have together. So I'll try to keep it brief so we can get into that discussion and get into the questions that you have. Just Food, our organization, has been working since 1995 to connect communities in New York City and local farmers with resources and support to make fresh, locally grown food accessible to everybody here in New York City. And Michael and Michael both hit on some of the challenges that we're faced, but unfortunately for too many of us, this is our food pyramid here. This is what we're eating. And so we know from Michael that we have this obesity epidemic. We know here in New York City that 25% of our kids are overweight or obese, and 2 out of 3 adults. So we have this obesity epidemic, but another challenge that we're facing is alongside of the obesity epidemic, we have widespread hunger in New York City. We have 1.8 million people in New York City who are relying on the federal food stamp program to buy food, and then I work with food pantries and soup kitchens. They make up our emergency food system, and about 1 out of every 8 New Yorkers, 1 out of 8, is going to food pantries and soup kitchens to get food. That includes 400,000 children. So alongside this obesity epidemic, we have the hunger problem here, and we have millions of people out of work. So this is the other issue we're facing. And as Michael Hurwitz talked about, issues around farm viability, farmers getting older, and environmental issues, the environmental impacts of our food system. So what is it that we're trying to create? What is our vision? Well, the first piece of it is we want to be growing and distributing healthy food, this good stuff, at all of the neighborhoods in New York City. And we want to use that as a tool to create jobs, especially given the economy right now. So how can we create jobs both in our rural communities, on our farms, and in urban communities for people to grow, process, distribute food? So that's a key part of what we're trying to create. And as Michael Hurwitz said, lots of work needs to be done to make sure that this good food here is accessible to people who are on limited incomes, and that we're also supporting good environmental practices in our own daily lives and in our own homes and also on our local farms. So something that is absolutely key and central at Just Food, central to our philosophy, is a community-driven approach. What we want to do is partner with people who are leaders in the communities that we work with, build capacity in those communities to address these issues. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the programs that we have, and you'll see how this community-driven approach runs throughout all of our programs. So I'm hoping that some people in the room are familiar with the concept of community-supported agriculture, CSA. But to explain it, since it is a new term for many people, CSA is a way of getting food directly from a local farm, and it's a subscription. It's kind of like a magazine subscription. So you pay up front, and then every week during the growing season, for us, that starts in June, here in New York City, you're getting this box of fresh vegetables directly from a local farm. And this is what a CSA share might look like this time of year, actually. Some squashes, leeks, potatoes, those tomatoes, that's before the frost comes, which I think some farms have already had their first frost, and a few got it last night with our cold night. So CSA, you, as a member, the benefit you get is every week you get this share of fresh vegetables directly from a local farm. And as Michael was saying, this is the good stuff, the stuff that tastes really good and is really fresh and is really good for us. For the farmer, the benefit of this CSA model is they are getting direct support from a group of committed customers. And there's no middleman here. It's a direct relationship. So everything you're paying for your food is going directly to that farmer. New York City, because we are such a big population, we have about 100 CSA programs all over the city in many different types of neighborhoods, and more are starting up all the time. And Just Food's role is to help start CSAs, not to run CSA programs, but to help communities start their own CSAs. And we've done a lot of work, too, with models to make CSA programs accessible to people of all incomes. The CSA in my neighborhood is able to accept food stamp benefits, and we do have members who use that to purchase their share. I love this picture. This is a really great picture of Abu Talib, who is an urban farmer and Just Food board member. And as you can see, he's a chicken keeper up in the Bronx. And Abu Talib is also one of our City Farms trainers. So our City Farms program is about growing food right here in New York City. And again, it's not our staff going out and showing people how to grow food. It's partnering with people like Abu Talib, who's really an expert. He's been doing this for many years in his community. And folks like Abu Talib, our City Farms trainers, lead workshops on how you grow food here in the urban environment. We also support a small network of community-run farmers markets. Yay, La Familia Verde. Some of you know Karen Washington, who's on Just Food's board and has been really a leader in the urban ag and community gardening movement here in New York City. And our role is to help provide technical assistance to people who want to start a community-run farmers market in their neighborhood. And our newest program is Farm School NYC. This is an urban agriculture training program for adults looking to train the next group of leaders to grow food right here in New York City. So kind of tapping into the fact that we need more farmers, and you know, being an urban farmer, that's becoming a profession now. So I know a few people who are able to make a living at that. This is the program I work on, Fresh Food for All, and we have funding from the State Department of Health that allows us to purchase food directly from local farms, over 200,000 pounds of fresh vegetables every year, and they go into food pantries where they get distributed to families who need access to something that's fresh and good for them. And so I've talked a little bit about all these different programs to increase access, but here's another piece of it. Some of the vegetables, if anybody in the audience has been a member of a CSA, you know you might be getting something that you haven't seen before, that you haven't purchased at a supermarket. For example, the Swiss chard pictured in this photograph, these are our trained community chefs, and we have a team of about 40 trained community chefs from the different communities that we work with, and they do cooking demonstrations showing people, what do you do with Swiss chard? How do you cook with parsnips? What do you do with a delicata squash or leeks? All of these things that people might be getting from local farmers. So another central piece of this philosophy, just like Greenmarket, we're really looking at how can, with this huge population in New York City, how can we impact farming in New York State for the better? And I believe about 30 years ago we had 50,000 farms in New York State. Now we have 36,000. So we are losing farms, we are losing farmland. So what can we do to help keep that viable? This year was an incredibly difficult year for farmers. And so part of our focus at Just Food is figuring out models that can help keep those farms in business. And I can give some more examples about the CSA model, how in a year like this, when farmers had really serious losses to their crops because of Hurricane Irene and Tropical Storm Lee, those farms who are doing CSAs, that was a big support to them in being able to withstand a natural disaster. I think one of the key things about this work is creating a direct relationship between the people who are eating food and the people who are growing the food. And I like this photograph because this is the farmer who grows my food. These are his hands. I'm a member of a CSA in my neighborhood, and Martin Rodriguez from Mimomex Farm is the person growing that food for me. So let me just say a few words about how you can get involved, and you can get involved at a lot of different levels. I would encourage you, I would challenge you to make some portion of what you're eating be food that comes from a local farm. So that might mean finding a Greenmarket. There's one right outside our door here that you can shop at, or look for a market in your neighborhood, a Greenmarket or one of the other farmers markets in the city. You can join a CSA program, and that's a great way to connect directly with a local farm. If you want to find out if there's a CSA in your neighborhood, you can go to justfood.org, and we have a tool on our website for finding the CSA closest to you. We're also encouraging people, if there is not yet a CSA in your neighborhood, to start a CSA, and we partner with groups in different neighborhoods to do that. Another thing I want to suggest is that everybody can grow some small piece of your own food, and it might just be some basil in your windowsill, which I have in my windowsill right now, and it's great to be able to just harvest right there while I'm cooking. But if you want to learn how to grow some of your own food here in the city in a community garden, or perhaps in your backyard or on your stoop in pots, come to one of our City Farms workshops. These workshops are free and open to the public. So if you go to justfood.org, you'll see a list of upcoming workshops focused on growing food here in New York City, but also how do you compost in your backyard, how do you can that food or make jam. So we invite you to participate in that workshop series. And then finally, I want to just mention that we all need to take an active role in helping shape our food system through policy. And whether this is at the city level, the state level, or the federal level, we're encouraging people to get more involved in policy issues. I want to mention just one that's really important right now, which is our Food and Farm Bill. This is something that's under consideration right now in Congress. And I say Food and Farm Bill because what a lot of people don't know, they hear Farm Bill, and yes, this is a piece of legislation that impacts agricultural policies for farmers and ranchers, but it's also our food bill. We know our food safety net is in the Food and Farm Bill. So the food stamp program and many other really important parts of our food safety net, funding for emergency food, funding for programs that increase access for communities on limited incomes. This is being considered in this piece of legislation, and it's very current right now as part of the deficit reduction talks and the super committee process. We're talking about the Food and Farm Bill. So if you want to learn more about this issue or other policy issues, do go to justfood.org, sign up for our monthly email newsletter, and you'll be kept up to date, kept current on this and other policy issues. So I really encourage everybody to get involved, and I'll stop there.
Thank you. And Todd, I see you in the back. I just want to say I'm not wearing a watch, so can you kind of give me a big wave when it's time to start other questions? Thank you. Well, I thought one of the fundamental points that came across from all of you, Abby and the two Michaels, was the need to reestablish or establish a better link between urban and rural. And Michael, at the end, if we could start with you on that. I mean, how difficult is that? How much success have you had? What do you think are the models for that happening?
Yeah, I mean, we've been working on that for a few years now, and with enormous interest, both on the public sector side and the private sector side. New business models are emerging, fast food business models that are interested in local regional food. And in the public sector, how to leverage the buying power. For example, in New York City, the City Council has a report called FoodWorks as it's come out, and it's had a number of policy recommendations to leverage the buying power of the city, the ability for the city to influence packaging and procurement practices. And what we're finding is in the work, being able to ask the question of why isn't local regional food affordable is an important one. It's a provocative question because, in fact, as the other Michael has said, the larger food systems costs are the term is externalized. The cost to the environment, the costs to health, all of these costs are actually not seen in the cost of the food you purchase. So as we start to reconstruct the gaps in the food infrastructure that have been lost by national systems and lack of investment in local regional systems, those cost differences are going to change. As businesses start to develop that become the bridges to create the link between the demand side and the supply side, we're going to see those prices go down. We're going to see the security begin to change.
Well, one of the things I have seen recently too is that the idea of larger food subsidies, which has always been so controversial, agriculture subsidies, is really, they're starting to fade. I mean, food prices are so high, even, the large scale farmers they're not even getting them anymore. And when talking to the Secretary of Agriculture, he said he wouldn't be surprised to see that disappear. So ultimately, if you're removing the idea of social engineering, it's really going to be about demand, isn't it, Michael? I mean, and then what interests me on that is it's education. And it seems as though that one of the critical things that you're doing is, getting young people involved and seeing what's going on from an early age. I mean, if you don't create that demand and the understanding that people should want healthy food, it's just not going to, the market's not going to be there.
I didn't eat spinach until I was 27 and pulled it out of the ground myself and realized what spinach was supposed to taste like. So of course, educating the future generation of advocates of consumer to the importance of supporting local agriculture and what that means in terms of community health, economic health, environmental health, and pure taste. I mean, that's crucial. It's a crucial piece. But until there is the infrastructure, wholesale infrastructure, aggregation points, both upstate and in the city, to create the supply, to create the supply to meet the demand here, we're still going to face the same challenges of getting locally produced food affordably.
And you said that really that the demand is unmet, that there is more of a demand here in New York for healthy, fresh food than can be filled?
The New York State Department of Agriculture and Markets released a study in 2007. So there was about a $870 million demand for local agriculture products in New York City. Now that's 4 years ago. Since then, it's even exploded more than that. Michael Muzak at Baldor says the demand is probably twice that at this point, and that doesn't include the institutional demand in New York City. The New York City Board of Education is the second largest provider of food to the Department of Defense in the world. So the buying power of New York City school system alone could transform local agriculture. But again, it's about getting the supply into the city in an effective and efficient way. And we don't have that infrastructure right now. There's no wholesale facility in Hunts Point, where we have the largest distribution center in North America. We really need to invest in our wholesale infrastructure if we're going to be able to bring it into the city. I mean, we are in the top 5 most productive agriculture states in a variety of products, and yet we're not buying those products in the city to the level that they should be purchased.
So where are they going?
They're going other parts of the country and overseas.
And Abby, is it a price problem? Is it that there's a demand, but only a demand up to a certain price point?
I mean, I think that's a really good question. I think one thing that's been figured out in the last 10 years or longer even, that groups have been working on, Greenmarket, Just Food, and others, is that direct farmer to consumer, the direct marketing piece. And I think we figured out how to create those direct connections, and there have been some real strengths in building relationships then between city folks and rural farms. But I think the gap is where Michael was just talking about with the infrastructure. So going back to the example of the school district, and I know this is something that Speaker Quinn has been working on with FoodWorks, is, why is it that we grow lettuce here in New York State? Why aren't we serving that lettuce in our schools and giving that to kids so they're having this healthy salad for lunch? Well, we're buying a ton of lettuce, and it's coming from California for the most part, and the reason being that we don't have the right kind of facilities to take that lettuce, wash it, bag it, and get it into the schools. So there's a step in between coming from the farm, this head of lettuce that hasn't been processed at all, and it's simple processing, just getting it washed and getting it ready to eat, but we don't have that facility that's doing that right now. And so that's a key issue that we could work on, and it ties into the economic issue of people need jobs, and that's the big thing here. The demand is everywhere, and I work with food pantries, so I see people of all different communities and different income levels, and people want this good quality food. They want the fresh vegetables, but people need to have money in order to buy the food. And so anything we can do to build our local food system, build our infrastructure, and at the same time create more jobs, that's definitely the direction that we need to be headed.
Well, Michael, Conard, though, is it, you would think, again, the infrastructure's missing, but there's demand, everybody wants it, so doesn't somebody stand to make some money by trying to put these facilities together, or is it not that simple? I'm sure.
There's huge economic opportunities. The private sector has been the provider for a long while, and the national companies have been, who use a nationalized system, a subsidized in a way system, are oftentimes more competitive at price point currently. So the private retailers, the private wholesalers already have an infrastructural system set up. Maybe they have a cut and bag some other location. Maybe it's in California. Some apples in Washington State actually have a rail system that delivers it to Albany, and it's brought by a semi to Hunts Point, and it makes a Washington State apple competitive with a Washington County apple. And so that those systems can change, and rethinking the value of a system that supports the local regional growers, the local regional economy, the local regional families, will keep a lot of those resources around the cities and in the areas where they're grown.
But again, you talk about rethinking.
Yeah.
Who needs to rethink? Is it the local government?
Yeah.
Is it just the demand of consumers saying, I don't want that apple from Washington State, I want an apple from New York? Or are they really focusing on where their good, healthy food comes from?
I think it's less thinking and more seeing. And when you can see that you can actually do it, and you can see examples and increments of how to get there, between entrepreneurship and great, people already beginning to think about it, with visible, viable steps, seeing that direction is going to make a difference.
Can I try to say one thing? So it's very expensive to do business in New York City. Cost of real estate alone, I mean, it's astronomical. We have an economic development corporation that views economic development as how much money can they make charging rent on their properties. That is our economic development corporation in New York City. In Toronto, their food terminal, which provides 2/3 of Canada, all of its produce, pays $54,000 a year in rent. That's the same that we pay for 12 farmers to stand on the new Fulton Fish Market parking lot with no infrastructure to keep them alive. Because the province of Ontario recognizes economic development to be, let's support the businesses to go out and build the jobs and make the money. And that is a very intentional decision by the government to say, this is how we are going to foster businesses, and this is how we are going to support our food community and our food sector in Canada. And if that could be done here in New York City, you would see more business development around processing and around aggregation to get food into the city.
And this is all probably much more likely to be successful if you're talking about government intervention at local levels, I would think. I mean, I don't think you're going to get the federal government behind, local sustainable agriculture in any. Abby, what do you think?
Well, I just wanted to add that there's a lot of really important pieces of federal policy that impact this, and it is in part on the accessibility side of things. So, Michael was talking about how some of the green markets are doing a lot of business in these coupon programs, and some of those are federally funded. So that's very real. I mean, that's a lot of money going into farmers' pockets that are helping support agriculture in our state, and those are federal dollars. And food stamps, that's our biggest food safety net program. 1.8 billion people here in New York City on the food stamp program, using food stamps to buy food when people are out of work. That number expands. And we're fortunate that in New York City, Greenmarket has done so much work, and other market networks have done so much work so that people can use food stamps at the market. But in other places, that's not taking place in the same way, and it's very difficult for CSAs to become authorized to accept food stamps. So,
and if they do, sorry to break in, but if you're using food stamps at the market, are you getting the same quantity of food, or do people using food stamps have to make a choice that they're going to get something better, but they're not going to get as much?
It depends. I think what Michael pointed out is, there are farmers at a lot of different price points at the market. So it's kind of based on how you shop. Sometimes when you're at the market, it can be less expensive than at a supermarket, depending on what you're looking for. And it can be more expensive for sure. So it depends on how you shop. But it could be, it's great that we're close to $1 million now in food stamp business, but if we could make it easier, and that's a policy issue, to make it easier for markets and CSAs to accept food stamps, because it's a technology issue that could be fixed.
I want to make just, can I say one very quick thing? The Bronx District Public Health Office released a study about price point between farmers markets in the Bronx compared to other food retailers in the South Bronx. And it wasn't just it was Greenmarket and Harvest Home and some of the community-based markets that Just Food supports. And what they found was it's basically a wash, right? So maybe potatoes one day were more expensive at the market, but carrots weren't, but really it's a wash. But from a value perspective, the quality that you buy at the farmer's market is far superior to what you're buying in the store. So you're getting more bang for your buck from nutritional value, and also shelf life, and what you throw away from. I mean, you can go to the store and buy a head of lettuce, and you end up throwing away half of it when you're cleaning it, but what you're buying at the farmer's market, you're not throwing away any of it. So you're actually paying more money ultimately for a lesser quality product.
You sound like you work for Greenmarket.
We're the believers up here.
We are. We are.
And I mean, just to sort of go back to the federal scale one more. Kathleen Merrigan, Lucas Knowles have been brought in to know your farmer, know your food, to expand, to begin to develop policy around the local regional scale. And they're a small group. They have people on infrastructure that work with them, teams of sustainability, and the private sector is critical to this. The finding models that are scalable, because many of the decisions at the federal scale are driven by the private sector. So finding those models, yes, as Michael's saying, the green markets won't provide all the fresh food and vegetables we need in a community. Finding those models, looking for viable examples to do that, are critical for leadership at a federal level. Yeah.
I can't tell if Todd's take some questions.
I think he is.
Can we do that? Yes. Do we have any questions?
That's good. You can see our audience.
I thought I'd pop up.
Yes, sir.
Good morning. My name is Felix Leo Campos. I'm a Revson Fellow alum. And I wanted to ask, in terms of these urban farms, how much did you derive your idea for urban farms from Cuba and their agricultural system, particularly after the 1960s?
You asked how much is the idea derived from Cuba. Is that, I maybe don't know the history as well as others here, but I guess what I would say is a lot of our urban farms and community gardens, we have huge immigrant populations, and I don't know if folks have been to East New York before and seen all of the different urban gardens, and there's people from a lot of different countries who have that agricultural experience in their background who are growing food now in New York City. Also, a lot of people who are coming up from the South and have some agriculture in their background. So I think our community gardening and urban farming movement here in New York City is very much derived from this wealth of agricultural experience that people have coming into the city.
And Michael, I wanted to ask you about the urban farming. I mean, in what you studied, what sort of impact can urban farming have on New York? What's the potential that is untapped at this point?
I mean, the first question is always how much, and I think that's actually not the most important question. There is the capability, there's the untapped capacities always within the city, but the opportunity to develop for community development, the opportunity for education, these are the real opportunities of urban agriculture. And yes, exemplary examples in Cuba of communities creating their own creating their food system from an industrialized system. Very, very good question.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Heidi, and like Abby, I work for Karen Washington. I think she's on your board. She's on my board. So I know a lot about the work that you guys do, and I would just commend you because you didn't mention it, but you also run the Black Farmers Conference, I think, and the Bugs, the Black Urban Gardeners, and just to give you an opportunity, I have two things. To give you an opportunity to talk a little about justice in terms of racial justice within this context, because I know there are only 130 black farmers in New York State. But then my other question for all of you, and I think, Michael, you kind of alluded to it in your presentation, is about corporate intervention, or what is the corporate what's the result of so much corporate control over our food system? Because from my perspective in the Bronx, I feel like there's a lot of corporations that make a lot of money off of making people sick. and then I have to sit there and help them get better, and we have to come up with a whole new way of doing business in order to make people healthy. And then I think of a farm bill, and I think, well, why? I know right now we're struggling with keeping the farm bill the same, and I wonder why is that? I mean, we need food. Is there a corporate reason for that? I meant because I know you talked about seeds, and I know we can't, I mean, the person was basically illegally probably keeping seeds. There's a huge amount of corporate manipulation within the system. So I was just wondering what you think about that.
Abby, we'll start with you.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you so much for pointing out that racial justice is a really big part of our work on food justice issues, and I'm glad that you mentioned Karen Washington, who's a board member at Just Food and is part of the Black Farmers and Urban Gardeners group. There's a group of people who have started that organization, and I think that one thing I'll just mention on racial justice is that in thinking about how we train this next group of leaders within urban agriculture, racial justice is something that is really informing that work. So with our farm school, that's our curriculum on growing food right here in the city. It's not just the nuts and bolts of how you grow food, but there are pieces of it that speak to community organizing and looking at issues of access and racial justice around our food system. So that's a really important part of the work that we're doing with our farm school, and in thinking about how we develop this next group of, or how we further develop people who are already growing food here in the city into the leaders of our urban ag movement.
Michael, corporate
talk
influence.
about corporate control of our
Greedy
United States
corporate,
foods. That
yes.
4 companies control 50% of the U.S. food supply, and what that means. I mean, you know what it means. That it's much harder to change federal policy because the dollars that they spend on lobbying, control of our food system, driving down the cost of production. So we're sitting up here talking about supply chain and how we can make wholesale products more affordable. And the flip side is food shouldn't be cheap, right? The producers of these products should be paid a meaningful wage for their work. And how do you change the culture and the nature? What is Occupy Wall? I mean, isn't this what is Occupy Wall Street, right? Like, how do you change the nature of the system, and then also work within it to make sure that you're protecting the people that are working? And I'll tell you, I don't know that answer, other than to continue to chip away and to continue to educate the public about what it means that 4 companies control our food system, and that there are alternative economic models like the CSA, like the farmers market, where you are investing in that farm and investing in a more sustainable future. New York is different than other parts of the country. I don't know that farmers in the Midwest have the same access to urban populations. I don't know that there are, so I don't know the big solution. I know the local solution. And I'd say the same thing internationally. We see the same international domination, global corporate domination of the global food system. And it really is local it's local solutions, whether you're talking in India or whether you're talking in North America. And you see the suicide rate of Indian farmers. It's directly related to the fact that they don't control their seeds anymore, that they are slaves to Monsanto. And I think it's awareness, and I think it's us changing our federal export system and what we conceive of globalization.
Well, we were talking earlier, and I wanted to ask Michael about this, which is, the idea of, and I know this already exists to some extent, but of a 2-tier food system, because when you have, especially when you have incentives for our agriculture businesses and there's the demand and the hunger to export food, and the price does matter, are we going to be in an even more stark situation where the educated, wealthy population controls the demand and the supply for the better food, and then much of the world gets our cheaply grown, less healthy food? I mean, is that what Sorry, Michael.
Does it?
Which Michael? Either Michael could take it.
Our system is constantly continuing to polarize. We already have a two-tiered. I think that this is efforts to prevent, to slow that. I mean, internationally, I mean, we've, recently in China and the Ukraine and Africa, and the loss of the ability to produce, process locally, regionally, is a consistent problem everywhere.
Yeah.
So this is something that we all face as a global population.
I do think that we can tie both the issue that Heidi mentioned about corporate control of the food system and this issue of how other countries are impacted to our federal agricultural policies, to the subsidies that we have. So we do have federal dollars that go to subsidize certain crops, soy, cotton, wheat, corn. These are the kinds of crops that are getting subsidized. And one thing that's important to know about the government subsidies is they have a few different impacts. One problem looking at kind of the corporate control is it's actually the Environmental Working Group that's done a lot of work to look at who are those subsidies going to, and unfortunately, larger corporate-run farms are getting more than their fair share of that money. So I think there's a pretty good argument in this time of cost cutting for us to look at how can we make sure that the government subsidies aren't going to people who, to corporate entities or to people who are already earning millions of dollars. So curbing that, I think, is important. But also tied into what you're saying about the impact on other countries is that if we're subsidizing crops and exporting those crops, then it may be that farmers in other countries are not able to compete with the crops that are coming from the U.S. And at first I thought, oh, well, that's because the crops coming from the U.S. are subsidized and they're lower priced, so they're coming in at a lower price. But what happens then is if a country loses its own capability, its own food sovereignty, they're not able to produce their own food, then once they lose that capability, once the price of food is on the world market, we know it goes up and down, and we've had these spikes in price. And so once you lose the capability to grow your own food as a country, then you're dependent on the world market. And that's why we've seen the food riots in other countries and people who can't afford food in other countries because maybe they're dependent on this supply, and when the price spikes, a lot of people are going to go hungry.
I think we have a question here.
Hi, Marion. I work at Cloth. I'm wondering, and your websites for Just Food is right up there. And I've been to the Just Food website, and I know all your organizations probably have websites, but I'm wondering now, what are your organizations doing with other digital technology, with Twitter, with just other means to connect people? Besides having Facebook pages, what are you doing in a day-to-day way to use that technology to do what you do, to get things to consumers, to get things to your farmers, to do all of that instantly?
We use Facebook, Twitter. Our farmers are using Foursquare, and it's funny. We have philosophical discussions in the office about should we embrace social media, and the answer is of course. We were forced to cancel all of our markets the day of the hurricane because the city was preparing for evacuation and just preparation for the hurricane to hit. And at the last minute, at 8 o'clock on Friday night before that Saturday, we got permission from the Parks Department to operate in a few locations. And we were able to hit, which is a small number, 35,000 people through our own Twitter feed. But then the New York Times and DNA Info and the Village Voice and other folks retweeted it. And we had a thriving market the next day. We would not have been able to do that 3 years ago. So from just the most basic hey, market's open, here's what's at market today. These are vital tools. But it's from an educational standpoint also, from whether it's here's an article or here let's mobilize around XYZ with the Farm Bill. And these are the tools of today. And they're not going to reach everybody. So we still have to use our more traditional models to reach folks who are not comfortable or who are not using new technologies. But it obviously is a fundamental part of the communications tools that we need to utilize.
You know, we do have to wrap up, but I wanted to ask each of you very quickly, because this is, the entire day is about community engagement, and especially for the students here. If you had to just in a sentence, talk about where you think community engagement right now and the engagement of these sort of young people, if they wanted to dive into service in some way, what part of this movement is in most need of hands and brains? Abby, we'll start with you. Sorry.
You know, I think community engagement, that's just so key for our organization. We're a really small organization, and pretty much everything we do relies on the partnerships we have. And I would say get involved in your neighborhood, your area, whether it's a community garden or a CSA, looking for ways to connect right there in your own neighborhood. And there's a lot of different projects if people are looking for opportunities to get involved in different neighborhoods. If you contact Just Food and let us know your interests, we can direct you to some of those projects that are happening.
Michael?
Yeah. A lot of the changes that are being made at Columbia are being driven by student interest. So, I would say, personalize the revolution, ask us the hard questions, follow your heart, pursue your passions. With good instincts, you will make the change.
We're a nonprofit organization. We rely on partnerships and volunteers, but I think just get involved, learn the issues, teach, and every opportunity is a teaching moment. So to not stay silent, and I'd say to really educate the folks around them, and to drive the process. Young people are a powerful force, and that's who changes the world.
Thank you all. It's such a cutting-edge issue, and it's terrific to see how all of this local engagement I think, can have an impact on the rest of the world, because New York, as it always is a terrific model and example. So thank you for your time. Appreciate it. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, Claire, and Michael and Abby. Thank you all so much. We are going to take a break now. We'll reconvene the rest of the forum with our next panel at 1:30. So we hope to see you there. Thank you so much.
Thank you.